September 14, 1944. Kummersdorf Proving Grounds, Germany. 800 hours Oberingenieur, Heinrich Ernst Kniepkamp, 46, chief designer at Waffenamt, walked around the captured American M4 Sherman with a measuring tape and growing disbelief. His team had spent 3 days examining this tank. They'd torn down the engine, measured every tolerance, tested every component. The High Command wanted answers. How were American tanks still running after conditions that destroyed German panzers? Kniepkamp's team expected crude workmanship, mass-produced junk that somehow worked through sheer numbers. What they found instead made him write a report that would sit, classified, in German archives for 30 years. He wrote one sentence that his superior ordered struck from the official record. "We have built superior tanks. The Americans have built a superior system." What German engineers discovered in that Sherman would force them to admit something no military power wants to acknowledge in wartime. The enemy had solved a problem they hadn't even recognized existed. By September 1944, Germany's tank production reached its wartime peak. The Panther, Tiger, King Tiger. Engineering marvels that outgunned anything the Allies fielded. On paper, Germany was winning the armor war. German doctrine since 1939. Build the best individual weapon. Superior armor, bigger guns, better optics. Quality over quantity. A single Tiger could destroy 5 Shermans. The math seemed simple. But frontline reports told a different story. Panzer divisions that started Operation Barbarossa with 200 tanks now fielded 30. Not from combat losses alone, from breakdowns, transmission failures, engine fires, track links that snapped in Russian cold. By 1944, German tank availability rates told the real story. 60% operational on a good day. Some units reported 30%. Panthers sat abandoned with perfectly good armor, dead from transmission failure at 400 kilometers. American Sherman availability, 85 to 90%. Always. The High Command needed answers. If German tanks were superior, why were American tank battalions always ready while panzer divisions sat broken? That's when they captured a Sherman near Aachen. Intact, barely damaged. The crew had abandoned it with a broken track. An easy field repair. German recovery crews noticed something immediately. This Sherman had 1,200 hours on the odometer. The engine started on the first crank. In a German tank, 1,200 hours meant complete engine rebuild time. This Sherman just needed fuel. Kniepkamp got the order. Find out why. The teardown began September 11th. Kniepkamp's team included Germany's best. Porsche engineers, Maybach engine designers, Krupp metallurgists, men who'd built the Tiger, the Panther, the finest tanks Germany ever produced. Day 1 findings shocked them. The engine, a Continental R975 radial aircraft engine. Not designed for tanks, adapted from a bomber. American engineers had simply bolted an airplane engine into a tank chassis. Kniepkamp's first reaction. This is barbaric. An aircraft engine in a tank? But the specifications told a different story. The engine was rated for 1,800 hours between overhauls. German tank engines, 500 hours if you were lucky. The Maybach HL-230 in the Panther was theoretically superior. 700 horsepower versus 400. But it rarely delivered that power for more than 300 hours before catastrophic failure. Hauptmann Otto Carius, Panzer ace with over 150 tank kills, was brought in to provide frontline perspective. His comment, recorded in the engineering log, "I've destroyed many Shermans, but I've never found one abandoned for mechanical failure. Only combat damage. I cannot say the same for our own tanks." Day 2. The transmission. German engineer Werner Oswald, who designed the Panther's transmission, spent 4 hours examining the Sherman's gearbox. It was crude by German standards. Synchronized gears, yes, but nothing sophisticated. Simple helical gears. Basic dog clutches. Engineering that looked 30 years old. Oswald's notes, preserved in archives. The American transmission is not sophisticated. It is not impressive. It is simply indestructible. I cannot break it. He literally couldn't break it. The team installed the transmission in a test rig and ran it at maximum load for 8 hours straight, 19 gear changes per minute. The kind of abuse that would shatter a Panther transmission in 20 minutes. The Sherman transmission got warm. That's all. Oswald's conclusion. They have built to a different philosophy. We build for maximum performance. They build for maximum reliability. In war, reliability wins. Day 3. The revelation that changed everything. Kniepkamp examined the tank's track system. Sherman tracks used rubber blocks. German tanks used all-steel tracks for durability. Steel was superior, obviously. Steel lasted longer, handled more weight, performed better in mud, except the Sherman's rubber block tracks told a different story. This particular tank's tracks had 2,800 kilometers on them. Still serviceable. A crew could replace a broken track block in 15 minutes with basic tools. One man could do it. German steel tracks? Superior performance, yes, but when they broke, and they broke constantly, replacement required a crane, a maintenance depot, and 6 hours minimum. Often, tanks with broken tracks were simply abandoned. The team pulled the Sherman's final drive assemblies. These components, which transferred engine power to the tracks, were the weak point in every tank. Panthers burned through final drives every 150 kilometers. It became so common that Panther crews carried spares. The Sherman's final drives had 1,200 hours on them. Barely worn, Kniepkamp called in Dr. Ferdinand Porsche himself. Porsche examined the final drives for an hour in silence. Finally, they've used commercial truck components. Modified, yes, but fundamentally truck parts. This is not advanced engineering. Kniepkamp. Yet they work. Porsche. Yes, they work. The full picture emerged over those 3 days. The Americans hadn't built a superior tank. They'd built a reliable tank. More importantly, they'd built a tank that stayed in the fight. The team calculated an American armored division with mediocre tanks, but 90% availability, could field 270 operational tanks on any given day. A German panzer division with superior tanks but 40% availability could field 80 tanks, and those 80 would be down to 50 by tomorrow. Kniepkamp wrote his classified report on September 17th. The document was 8 pages. The relevant conclusion: the Sherman's components are individually inferior to German equivalents in nearly every measurable way. Yet the complete system is superior for sustained warfare. The Americans have accepted lower peak performance in exchange for consistent performance. We have built tanks that dominate the battlefield for 3 months. They have built tanks that dominate the battlefield for 3 years. He included a comparison chart that made his superiors uncomfortable. Panther average operational time before depot-level maintenance, 300 kilometers. Sherman average operational time before depot-level maintenance, 4,800 kilometers. The Sherman could drive from Berlin to Moscow and back twice before needing the level of maintenance a Panther needed after driving from Berlin to Hamburg. But the most damning section was titled Supply Chain. Integration. The team had examined the Sherman's parts. Every bolt, every washer, every component was standardized. The same thread pitch, the same bolt head sizes. A crew needed 3 wrenches to maintain the entire tank. They'd found something else: parts commonality. The Sherman's engine components were shared with American trucks, half-tracks, and some aircraft. The electrical system used civilian automotive parts. The periscopes used commercial glass. This meant something profound. If a Sherman broke down, any American supply unit could probably fix it with parts on hand. If a Panther broke down, it needed Panther-specific parts from Germany. In the field, this meant a broken Sherman was back in action in hours. A broken Panther was abandoned or sat waiting for weeks. Kniepkamp's final paragraph, ordered removed from the official report. We have designed tanks to win battles. The Americans have designed tanks to win wars. These are not the same thing. The implications rippled through German engineering circles, though the full report remained classified until 1974. But some lessons leaked. By October 1944, German tank designers received new guidance: prioritize reliability over performance. Too late. Germany's industrial capacity was collapsing. The numbers told the story. By March 1945, Germany had built approximately 6,000 Panthers. On any given day, fewer than 1,000 were operational. The rest sat broken, abandoned, or awaiting parts that would never come. America had built 49,000 Shermans by war's end. Operational availability never dropped below 80%. That meant 40,000 operational tanks available across all theaters. The Sherman's reliability had strategic effects beyond the battlefield. Operation Cobra, the Normandy breakout, succeeded partly because American armored divisions could sustain high-tempo operations for weeks. German panzer divisions could manage days before mechanical attrition forced pauses. In the Battle of the Bulge, December 1944, the Wehrmacht threw everything into one last offensive. Initial German success was dramatic, but by day 5, panzer availability had dropped to 30% from mechanical failure and lack of spare parts. American armored units, rushed from across France, arrived with 90% of their Shermans operational. General Heinz Guderian, architect of German panzer doctrine, wrote in his post-war memoirs, "We built better tanks. They kept more tanks running." In retrospect, their approach was wiser. The validation came from an unexpected source. In July 1945, American and Soviet forces met at Torgau. Soviet tankers, who'd received over 4,000 Shermans through Lend-Lease, compared notes with American crews. Colonel Dmitry Loza, Soviet tank officer who commanded a Sherman battalion, 1990 interview. "We called it the Emancipator. Not because it was better than our T-34. It wasn't. But it always started. In minus 40-degree cold, our T-34s needed fires under the oil pans to start. The Sherman started. Every time, reliability is not glamorous. But it wins." The British, who received 17,000 Shermans, reached similar conclusions. Field Marshal Bernard Montgomery, no fan of American equipment generally, wrote in 1947, "The Sherman's greatest virtue was not its gun or armor. It was that we always had them." Present-day analysis confirmed what German engineers discovered in 1944. The U.S. Army Ordnance Museum examined wartime maintenance records. The average Sherman required 2 hours of maintenance per operational day. The average Panther required 6 hours. Over a campaign, this meant American tank crews spent more time fighting, and German tank crews spent more time fixing. This became U.S. military doctrine. Today's M1 Abrams tank design specifications prioritize reliability over peak performance. The requirement: 7 days of sustained combat operations without depot maintenance. This standard traces directly back to Sherman philosophy. Current U.S. Army Field Manual FM 3/2015 states, "A tank that runs wins battles against a tank that doesn't, regardless of which has the bigger gun." The German report itself remained classified until 1974, when East German archives released wartime technical documents. Kniepkamp's full 8-page assessment, including the removed sections, became public. Military historians recognized it immediately as vindication of American design philosophy. A 1976 symposium at West Point made Kniepkamp's Sherman evaluation required reading for engineering officers. Dr. R.P. Honeycutt, in his definitive work Sherman, A History of the American Medium Tank, wrote, "The Germans understood the Sherman better than we did. They recognized we'd built something more important than a weapon. We'd built a weapon system that sustained itself." Heinrich Ernst Kniepkamp never spoke publicly about his Sherman evaluation. He survived the war, briefly held by American forces, then released. He refused post-war invitations to work for American or British tank programs. He returned to Stuttgart, where he'd grown up, worked as a commercial truck designer until 1968. Colleagues said he rarely discussed the war. One exception. In 1965, Daimler-Benz hired him as a consultant for a new truck transmission project. The young engineers presented an advanced design. Sophisticated, high-performance, complex, Kniepkamp's response, recorded in company notes. It's very impressive. Now design one that works in Russia in winter, that a mechanic can fix with basic tools, and that runs for 100,000 kilometers before depot maintenance. Then you'll have built something useful. The project was redesigned. The resulting transmission powered Mercedes trucks for 20 years. Engineers called it the Kniepkamp standard. He died in 1971, age 73. His obituary mentioned his wartime work designing tank suspensions. His Sherman evaluation wasn't declassified yet. His son, interviewed in 1982, shared a conversation from 1967. I asked father what he learned from the war. He thought a long time. Then, the Americans taught me that sophisticated and effective are not the same thing. The Germans were sophisticated. The Americans were effective. I spent my career confused about which was superior. Werner Oswald, who'd examined the Sherman transmission, emigrated to Argentina after the war, worked for a mining equipment company. In a 1979 letter to a colleague, he reflected, "We German engineers believed complexity proved skill. The more sophisticated the solution, the better the engineer." Then I examined American equipment. Their solutions were often crude, but they worked and kept working. That's when I understood. The best engineer isn't the one who builds the cleverest machine. It's the one who builds the machine that still works on Thursday. Otto Carius, the Panzer ace who'd provided frontline perspective, survived the war with over 150 tank kills to his credit. He opened a pharmacy in Herscheid, Germany, ran it until 2011. In his 1992 memoir, Tigers in the Mud, he wrote, "I destroyed many Shermans, but I never underestimated them. A Sherman always showed up. You could destroy one, but 5 more would appear, all running perfectly. A Tiger might be superior tank for tank, but the Americans won tank for war." The American crews who operated Shermans had their own perspective. Staff Sergeant Lafayette Poole, one of the highest-scoring American tank aces, survived the war with over 1,000 hours in Sherman combat. 1983 interview, age 61. Everyone wants to talk about how the Sherman couldn't match a Tiger. Sure, but here's what they forget. My Sherman was always running. We'd pass German tanks, beautiful machines, sitting dead on the road. We'd be in our inferior tank heading to the fight. That Sherman brought me home. I'll take reliable over superior any day. The men who built the Shermans had a simpler philosophy. William Knudsen, head of U.S. wartime production and former General Motors president, explained in a 1945 speech, "We didn't try to build the world's best tank. We tried to build a tank that would still be fighting when the war ended." Turns out those are the same thing. Today, 8 Sherman tanks still run at museums worldwide, all operational. Some have over 5,000 hours on original engines. At the U.S. Army Ordnance Museum, Aberdeen, Maryland, docents demonstrate a 1943 Sherman. Start it cold, no preheat, even in winter. Starts on the second crank. Every time, the tank has 6,800 hours on the odometer. School groups ask the question, why didn't we build better tanks? The docents answer, we did. This is it. At the German Tank Museum in Munster, Germany, they display a Panther tank beside captured wartime documents. One document, Kniepkamp's Sherman Evaluation Report, framed under glass. Next to it, a placard. Sometimes the best engineering is the engineering that works. Tour guides share the paradox. The Panther beside the plaque is a replica. Original Panthers are too mechanically fragile for regular demonstration. The museum's Sherman? They drive it in parades. There's a principle here that transcends tanks and wars. Engineers call it Kniepkamp's lesson. Perfect is the enemy of reliable. In 1944, German engineers built tanks that represented the pinnacle of automotive engineering. Sophisticated metallurgy, advanced optics, powerful guns, thick armor. On paper, they were superior in every way, but they broke, constantly. And a broken superior tank is worth less than a running inferior one. The Americans understood something fundamental. In war, the weapon that's present wins battles against the weapon that isn't. Doesn't matter how good the absent weapon is. This wasn't just military wisdom. It's engineering wisdom, design wisdom, life wisdom. How many projects fail not because the solution is inadequate, but because it's too sophisticated to sustain? How many superior systems lose to good enough systems that actually work? The Sherman teaches us reliability beats performance. Presence beats perfection. Simple beats sophisticated. Most days, showing up beats being the best. At Arlington National Cemetery, Section 12, there's a row of graves from the 3rd Armored Division, men who fought in Shermans from Normandy to Germany. The unofficial division motto carved on a memorial stone: "We didn't have the best tanks. We had the tanks that were there." Visitors place stones on those graves, sometimes coins. Occasionally, someone leaves a small mechanical part, a bolt, a washer, the kind of simple, reliable component that kept Shermans running. The lesson isn't subtle. Wars aren't won by the best weapons. They're won by the weapons that keep fighting. Next time you face a choice between sophisticated perfection and reliable adequacy, remember Kniepkamp standing in that Kummersdorf garage in September 1944. Remember a German engineer examining an American tank and realizing he'd spent his career optimizing for the wrong variable. You don't need to build the world's best solution. You need to build the solution that still works on Thursday. Heinrich Kniepkamp spent 3 days examining a Sherman and learned what took Germany 6 years of war to understand. The tank that shows up beats the tank that doesn't. Simple as that.